guys, it's Diabetic Girl. Welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to do a sort of big video with a lot to talk about, and I'm hoping to give you a more personal feel than studio sessions did. So today I want to talk about my journey with type 1 diabetes, which is about 18 years long at this point in time, which is ridiculous. So, for a lot of the stuff where I'm younger, it's mostly stories that my mom has told me. So yeah, let's get into it and get it done. I've also tried to film this video like 4 times in the past hour, and just as I get to the good part, my camera decided to stop recording. So I was like, are you serious? So I'm hoping that this time it'll go all the way through, and if the video gets jumpy, I'm sorry, it's because it stopped recording again and I wanted to keep going. So let's get into it. So as you guys know, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes on January 14th, 1998, and I was 21 months old. I was in Aruba at the time, and I had lost a ton of weight, and I was dehydrated all the time, I had to pee all the time, and I had basically lost the ability to walk at that point in time. So when we were in Aruba, my mom obviously kept bringing me to doctors because, I wasn't myself, and they just kept telling her I had the flu. So she believed it and thought nothing of it, which obviously no parent would think anything of it. And then I got on the plane home and I became unconscious on the plane, and the nurse on there, I believe her name was Sarah or Jessica, I can't really remember, and she saved my life that day and made sure there were ambulances at Logan Airport to come and get me to bring me to Boston Children's Hospital. So we got to Boston Children's Hospital, I don't know the exact time, where I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and my blood sugar was well over 750 at that point in time. And doctors had told my mom that if she had been any later, I probably wouldn't be alive. So before I dive into the rest of my story, for those of you who don't know what the symptoms of type 1 diabetes mellitus are, it is dehydration, weight loss, constant peeing, and this is because your blood sugar is over, 300. It's because your blood sugar is high. These symptoms can also be compared to a high blood sugar symptom. So, there we go. So, the first couple of weeks that I had type 1 diabetes was obviously really hard on my family. My mom was probably only a year older than I am now. So for those of you who don't know, I'm 20, so my mom was around 21, I think. My dad was, I want to say 20. I know there's a little bit of an age difference, but I'm not sure how much. And obviously they were both nervous. My grandparents were nervous. Just a lot. After my diagnosis and after I was out of the hospital that first time, I was in and out of the hospital again with, respiratory infections. Anytime I got sick at that point in time, it was almost an immediate hospitalization. And for those of you who didn't know, I did lose the ability to walk when I was first diagnosed. So I had to go to physical therapy for a little while, and then anytime after that I would get sick, I would be afraid that I wouldn't be able to walk again, so it was always a very scary experience for myself. So the biggest holiday, after my initial diagnosis was my second birthday. It was 2 months after I got diagnosed, and my mom obviously had a lot of trouble planning that birthday party. Cream cheese frosting, things that she thought I could do, and most of my childhood, and I've mentioned this before, was taken from me because of my diabetes, and not in a bad way, but I definitely lived differently than other children, and, I was, I don't know, how old are you in the 3rd grade? So I was 8 or 9, or maybe even 7. It was somewhere between the ages of 7 and 9. When I first started going to the Barton Center for Diabetes Education, and I've mentioned them in so many of my videos, and I give them credit for basically everything that I am today. I am purely a product of them, especially when it comes to diabetes. And, I spent one weekend there, and it was the weekend called Live, Laugh, Learn, and it was the first weekend I ever went, and by the end of that weekend, I had decided that I wanted to be there over the summer, and that I was ready to do this. So at that weekend program, I talk about this one a lot as well, and I think I'll find the picture for this video. At that weekend program, I gave myself my first shot, and it was really scary to me, honestly, because I had never had to do it. My mom had always done it, and my grandfather too. So, I had all these people who always wanted to support me, and I had never really thought about taking on my own diabetes. So I went there and was beyond happy to see that there were people who were just like me and that I wasn't alone, which I felt I was a lot of the time. And one of the main reasons when my mom brought me to camp was because I started to feel like I was alone, and I didn't know any other diabetics, and my mom wanted me to be able to meet someone who was like me and bond with people who were just like me. And so that was that was what I did. And I was in the 3rd grade at the time, and then the year afterwards I went on a Medtronic pump when I was in the 4th grade, and I was really, really nervous. And I mentioned this teacher in my teacher video a couple months ago. I had this teacher in the 4th grade who was beyond supportive and like always wanted to learn and do exactly what he could. And it was really, really, really cool. And I had a best friend at the time who I'm still very close with today. And he was just so, so awesome with trying to learn and figure out what we had to do. And it was nice. And, I don't really want to say my diabetes ever really caused a problem. By the time I was 10, I was almost advocating fully, like on my own. We'd go to camp and I'd get adopted out for a weekend with a family to help them learn about how to care for their type 1 diabetes. And it was really cool. I really liked doing that kind of stuff. And, you figure now, let's see, we're up to about middle school. Middle school was a different time for me, and it was really strange. Again, I was super, super quiet about it in middle school. Like, my friends, the friends that I was close friends with knew, and I was okay with that. But we also were, like, a graduating class when I graduated of, like, 48 kids. So, at that point in time, they mostly all knew. And, in the 7th grade, I made that big switch from a Medtronic pump to an Animas pump. And I've talked about it before. I loved, loved, loved wearing my Animas. But my biggest problem was that I'm very rough. I drop things. I wake up and my pump is, like, on the floor next to my bed. So I would constantly, like, crack the screen. And if you crack the screen, then the pump itself isn't actually, waterproof anymore. And Animas swears by this waterproof pump, so they'd have to replace it all the time. So it just wasn't for me. And then I hate talking about this. The summer between my 8th grade graduation and my freshman year of high school, I was at camp, like I always had been, and it was a really, really tough year at camp. And I attempted to take my own life using my pump. So I was hospitalized for a week between 2 different, institutions. And it was a wake-up call, but it was also really scary. And I don't like to look back on it and think about it too often, because it was definitely a very different time in my life. I was depressed. I had gotten to know my friends so well, and then I was going to high school without them because I went to a school in Marblehead, and I live in I live in Beverly, so it was really hard. And I think that was my way of trying to cope with the situation, even though it didn't really fix anything. It just kind of made things worse. So from that point in time, that was in July, so I stopped wearing a pump for 6 months. And it was hard. I don't know what I thought I was doing. I don't know if I thought it would make me cool. I don't know what went through my head, but I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy that it didn't succeed, obviously. So I started my freshman year of high school, and I was on shots. And then around that time when I was a freshman, the Medtronic Paradigm Revel 722 came out. So in October of my freshman year, I decided I wanted to go back on a pump, because that was just what I was used to. And it was really hard to put it back on. I'm not going to lie. It brought back so many negative memories, and I knew that I had to rewrite this, obviously, and not be super upset by it. So I started, living kind of normally, and things were going pretty well, actually. And then, at this time, at the end of my freshman year of high school, even during my freshman year, I was still going to camp. I knew I needed to be there. One of the weirdest things about camp is that no matter what I did or no matter who I was, they always accepted me and they always wanted me. And no matter what I was going through in the real world, I could go to camp for a few hours and I could walk away. And it was always okay, I could have, the worst year of my life. My freshman year was probably the hardest year I ever had. And, come March and April and May, when we were gearing up for camp, I would always get so excited because even if I was only gone for a week, or volunteering for a week or a weekend, I always knew that I had a home. I'm so sorry, guys. I always knew I had a home, and for so long that was so hard for me to understand. But it always made me feel better. And so the summer in between my freshman and sophomore year of high school, I decided to volunteer at the day camp. And for those of you who have been following my videos, this whole persona is what came from day camp, and it's the one thing that I still always have. And that first summer was really, really, really cool. I learned a lot about myself, and I learned about how to be a role model. And then that following year, so going into my sophomore year, I went back to volunteering in the kitchen with my mom at weekend programs. And I mentioned her in my last video. I had a camp counselor named Caitlin, and she's she's basically the reason why I gave myself my first shot. She always took care of me, and she had been missing from camp for a really, really long time. I basically hadn't seen her since I was 12. So she came back for one final weekend, and it's always such a weird story to me because when I first met Caitlin and she put me on a Medtronic pump, I was wearing a Silhouette, and the Silhouette came out, so she talked me into wearing a different kind of pump site, which is the site for that point in time I had been using for, ever, 6-7 years. And the final night I spent with Caitlin, because for those of you who don't know, she died about a week after this happened. And the final night I spent with Caitlin, I put in one of these sites all by myself, and I was beyond proud, and she gave me this ribbon that was sitting in the healthcare office that says "I love you," and it's somewhere. I believe it's in my camp backpack from a couple of years ago. And she died, as I said, a week later, and that was one of the hardest things I'd ever been through. And from that point in time on, I wanted to carry on her message that she had given to me when I was little, which was that my diabetes will always be a part of me, but never all of me. So the following summer, I went back to day camp, and I was there, and I was a counselor, and my first year, I had 2 absolutely amazing groups of children. I had a great group in Boston, and then another really good group in Worcester. And I'll never forget, at the end of my week in Worcester, I had a camper who had come all the way from, I want to say Lebanon, somewhere pretty far. And her parents had told me that I had really inspired her to really embrace herself because of who I was and what I was doing. And I was shocked. I was beyond honored. And, I've always kept that with me no matter what I do. And, I started my junior year of high school, and I wasn't exactly in a rough place, but I definitely wasn't myself. And, in high school, I went back to, reverting in on my diabetes and keeping it on the down low, And at the end of my junior year of high school, the last 2 or 3 months, my mom had stepped out of my diabetes care, and for those of you who don't know, she had been pretty involved in it for as long as I could remember, and I was getting really sick of it. It was putting a strain on our relationship. It just wasn't worth having her involved when it was making both of us unhappy. So I went ahead and I took it on by myself, and that was the first time I had experienced diabetes burnout. I gave up. My blood sugars were through the roof. My A1C was like a 14. It was terrible. And in the midst of trying to control that, I was at Barton Center again, and I think one of the most amazing and special things about that place, especially with my journey, is how much it encouraged me to do better. For those of you who didn't know, I flunked algebra my junior year of high school, and they wanted to hold me back, and I wasn't going to graduate in 2014, and I was really, really depressed, and on top of that, my diabetes care absolutely sucked. And so I started my senior year of high school the following fall because they couldn't hold me back. I had too many credits, and I started taking a class called Studio Productions. And, you know, one of the first episodes we did was in November, and my partner for the show had been like, hey, let's talk about diabetes awareness for our November episode. So I was, like, super excited to do that. And then it kind of hit me, like, hey, this is what I want to be doing. And I had already been filming videos for a YouTube channel at that point in time, and was really starting to fall in love with myself and realized that I was everything I could be. In my senior year, I was still doing a lot of volunteer stuff at the Barton Center, so that was really cool. I was filming some vlogs and stuff while I was there, you know, just really, really, really having a great time and being able to finally realize what I wanted to do. And I will never forget when I thought I wanted to go into child psychology, which was my original major, believe it or not. My senior year of high school, I had my camp director write a recommendation letter. And she talked about how I always made my campers feel, you know, special, and how I made them feel treasured and important and supported. And that's how I always felt at camp. And I was, you know, so amazed to read that and think like, wow, that's amazing. So my senior year, as you guys know, in February, became the kickoff of what was known as Diabetic Girl Studio Sessions, and this is where it gets a little sticky again, because my mom had once again kind of backed out of my diabetes care. Not like backed out like she chose to, but backed out because I was becoming so resistant towards her. And again, just completely out of control, and I'm embarrassed to admit it, but it needs to be said. Okay, I went through a burnout that lasted about 2 years, and I'm ashamed to talk about it because, you know, as I said in another video, I felt like I was living a lie because, you know, I was doing a show about my diabetes and, like, acting like I had it all together when in reality I didn't. And I had a huge wake-up call last June. My A1C was still ridiculously high, and, you know, I mentioned it in my last video, I don't like asking for help. And I remember Kai was at that doctor's appointment, and I don't want to say it's because of him that I've gotten better, but in a way it kind of is. Because, you know, he's on top of it to an extent, as anyone else would be. He gets just as concerned as I do, but I honestly say that I definitely, like, took the reins and tried to get better. And, you know, I think that there's a lot that you guys can learn from me, which is why I do this. You know, I went through a period where I didn't want to admit I had diabetes. I went through it twice, you know, and I've really tried to become the best that I can be and make every moment count. I've made a lot of mistakes. I'm the first person to admit that I've made a ton of mistakes, but I'm glad I made them and learned from them, and I really am looking forward to seeing where I'm going. You know, like I said in my last video, it's definitely not a curse. I'm thankful for the life I've been given, and I think that, you know, if I can change in any way I can and try to fix it and make my care better, then I definitely will, and I'm definitely trying to. My last A1C was an 8, so I'm getting there. Definitely getting there, definitely doing better. But, you know, it's been a journey and it's been a ride. And, you know, I'm beyond thankful for everyone who's been a part of this journey and this ride. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will talk to you all later. If you have any questions, comments, go ahead and comment down below, and I will talk to you all later. Bye!